Hi, my name is Carrie Pedro, and this is my instruction video for the best practices in instruction. There were some areas that the author described. The best practices in comprehension included fictional text was one part. So whenever we were teaching fictional text in our classroom, one of the best practices the author mentioned was pre-reading. This allows students to build background knowledge and increase their understanding. By doing this, there could be a picture walk, but the author stressed the importance of not giving away too much of the story and kind of letting the story unfold, but not letting the students know what happens too much. And then during reading, some tips that we could do or use was for teacher read alouds. When we're reading aloud to the students, we would think out loud like what we would normally do when we were reading for our own enjoyment. We would focus on important moments of the story, but not stopping every page, kind of keeping the story still moving fluidly. After reading, some of the best practices for comprehension would be story retelling and answering open ended questions, even like you could have students come up with these questions. For informational text, whole class read alouds with small group guided reading groups to focus on specific reading skills. So it depends on what you're learning or what the kids needed to work on. You could break them up into small groups. Whenever students read independently, then they can reread the materials by themselves. So if we read it as a class the first time, rereading independently. If you're learning about snakes, you could read the mentor text and then have additional books that the students could also read about snakes. And then for this teacher to model how readers can learn from pictures or tables. So a lot of informational texts have pictures or tables. Some of the kids might not even know to look at those. So that would be our job to help like teach them and let them practice. And then ask questions to students when reading out loud to highlight important parts of the books. So if you know something is a skill or that it's going to be needed to be known in the future, reiterating the importance of that when you're doing your read aloud. For word study, there's obviously the phonological awareness, the phonics, high frequency word, and fluency portions. The phonological, you could do rhyming books, substituting sounds, and these are used like in the early elementary because the author stressed the importance that students do not have to know letters to do this awareness. This is focusing more on the sounds. For phonics, if the students in your class are having difficulties, it's important to find the difficulty so that you can have interventions to help. Some of the phonics activities that they discussed were sorting pictures with beginning, middle, and ending letters or sounds. For high frequency words, the authors said the important part of this studying these were that students can chunk sounds rather than looking at the whole word. I think the example was like night and right and sight. They know that if they learn the "ite" part, they can just chunk that and focus on the individual letter at the beginning. And then fluency, for the first time, hearing the teacher read this aloud, then paired reading so that there can be a student helping a more like struggling reader hear how it's supposed to sound fluently, and then choral reading, and then having repeated readings. And the one thing that helped the fluency was for students to read for a purpose. So the author talked about like readers theater, knowing that they may have be reading out loud in class. For writing, it's important to have a writing center and have whole group and small group writing lessons, kind of like the previous slides, that not all people struggle with the same thing. So by having small groups, you can help students. They stress the importance to write for a purpose, kind of like the readers theater. Sending letters in the mail, sending emails to their parents, making cards for people. These the students know will be read, so by knowing people will read them, they will want to learn to how to do these correctly. When students are writing, let them know that their writing will be read out loud, kind of like readers theater, and that by others hearing it, they will once again take their time. There is speaking and listening and vocabulary. For speaking and listening, students, this is what I need to work on. Students need to speak and answer questions in sentences. So, like if you're doing your lunch choice, what do you want for lunch today? Pizza. We should have them say, I want pizza for lunch today, so that they're used to writing and speaking in full sentences. It's our job as educators to use these manners, encourage the students to use manners, and when talking, make sure you're not interrupting, stay on topic, and um, we should be modeling this for our class. For the vocabulary practices, when reading a story, make sure to explain the words in context. When you're reading out loud, use expressions, ask questions, and once again, demonstrate the thinking that proficient readers would do. When the kids have new vocabulary, it's important to go over the vocabulary words every day. You can use them in a sentence, write a synonym, have the words used in student writing like morning messages, and just make sure that they're hearing them more than just when you're reading the book. The authors also in Chapter 7 explained practices for content and disciplinary literacy. For content literacy, this background knowledge is important. So if you're learning about farms, the authors showed that you could have the students talk to like a farmer or go on a field trip or talk to an expert in that area. Once again, vocabulary is important so that they know what they're learning about and they're able to understand. Students could use graphic organizers to help them learn their new material that they're covering. And teaching the students notes, I think the author described that students could take notes, but they might write everything, and we should help them to find the key details and the main points. So we would have to model this first so that students understand what it means to take notes. And then students, when they write to learn, this is not for like, oh, you forgot a capital, oh, you forgot a period. This is for students to write down, what did I learn? What do I now know? What do I still have questions about without knowing they're going to be graded on their conventions? For the disciplinary literacy, these are things that the children have to be taught in order to understand a given subject. So if we do the closed readings, this allows the students to focus on a passage and really make sure that they know to understand it. Like if this is an important part, the students have deep understanding rather than just reading it one time and taking a test at the end. So the teacher would read this out loud, then the students would read this independently. But for students who struggle with decoding and fluency, if the teacher does a teacher read aloud audio, a teacher audio, the student could listen to this and that would help their comprehension. With the annotations, if students all know the same thing for like, oh, I love this, I'm having questions about this, and there's like the four main um, annotations. When the teacher's walking around, she's able to see like, oh, he doesn't have very many notes, or oh, she's got a lot of notes, or she's got a lot of question marks. I think we need to go back. So this is an easy way for teachers to gauge comprehension for the annotation reasons. And if this is a student-led discussion, this is another good practice for disciplinary. So the author gave a couple tips that the students could answer open-ended questions and use phrases to be reiterated. So if this was an open-ended question and maybe someone wasn't paying attention, you could say, oh, I like how you said that blank, blank and blank, or the main ideas of this passage, or yeah, that was really good. And then by reiterating this, the student who wasn't paying attention or the others who were like, oh, that might be important. And by hearing it multiple times, they will most likely remember this. So like I just said, student could answer the question, a teacher could reiterate it, but by having discussions, the teacher can also fill learning gaps. So if she or he sees that things got overlooked, she can or he can start discussing this, and these important parts can be readdressed. And the last thing that the teacher said for disciplinary literacy was writing with evidence. So first in elementary grade, which is what I teach, like we start with the personal narratives, then that eventually leads to writing to a prompt question, stating words from the question and answering in complete sentences, which will eventually lead to argumentative writing that the students can use their own voice. So the author gave many tips for these practices, and I thought they were pretty practical for all age groups. So I hope you liked my presentation. Thanks for watching.